You're listening to the 49 Carats podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph, as always, and I'm here joined by TheSFNiners, Brad Graham. What's going on, Brad?
I'm doing pretty good. Sorry, I have a echo going. Apologies. There we go. Sorry, I had two connected situations going, but I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. Everyone watching, we got to give Brad some congrats on getting his old Twitter account back. I know that that's a pretty big deal. Now he has two accounts,
Right.
so that's pretty awesome. It was too bad they gave it back after you got the same amount of followers, but now you got over 17,000 followers and two accounts. That's pretty powerful right there. So Brad is just pretty much like Thanos. He's collecting as many Twitter accounts, powerful Twitter accounts as he can. So props to him on that. Before we talk about Rookie Minicamp, which is happening right now, I just got to tell you guys, we're doing a giveaway. Well, I'm doing a giveaway for a Trey Lance jersey. Okay. So if you want to be entered to win this Trey Lance jersey, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And after that, the second step, you have to go to my Twitter page. And my Twitter is @Stragasaurus. Okay. If you go to the pinned tweet, reply to that pinned tweet with a screenshot of you subscribed to my YouTube, and then you're entered to win. So I'm going to be announcing the winner next Wednesday, or this upcoming Wednesday on the 18th. So stay tuned. But let's just get right into some of this talk around Rookie Minicamp. First, let's talk about some of the rookies who are going to be there. Over here on the left, you can see the 49ers draft picks, and on the right, you can see their undrafted free agents. A lot of exciting names out of that group. Brad, who besides Donovan West, who are you most excited to hear about out of this group?
So we were actually just over on my channel doing a live, and we were watching some of the practice videos that have been dropping. And someone who stood out to me right away was Tay Martin out of Oklahoma State. Now he's wearing that number 49 jersey. It's looking a little ugly for a wide receiver, but one of the just quick little clips that we saw was his first step get off, just working through some positional drills. And they had Danny Gray in the front, the third round pick, it's one of my favorite selections in the draft, but they had Tay Martin right behind him, and the get off that he showed, I was like, ooh, okay. And again, it's a little something to look at, but I was pretty impressed with that. Another one that I was really excited about seeing today was Jason Poe out of Mercer, getting to see that little squatty body, the 6'1", 300-pound dude. He can move. He just has great movement ability, great feet, and of course, the leverage is already there with the size. So it was really good to see him. But overall, I mean, I'm excited about this entire class, not only of the draft picks, but the undrafted free agents as well. I think the 49ers killed it this year.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think it's going to be interesting to see who out of this group sticks around, because obviously they can't keep everyone, and they already have a pretty deep roster as it is. So I think that's what we're going to be paying attention to the most. I have a couple of those clips that you were mentioning, actually. Let me just make sure I pull up the right one here, because these are the running backs. So let's return to that one. But I believe these are the wide receivers right here. This video was posted by David Lombardi on Twitter, so shout out to him for this clip. And I think this is the one you're talking about, right?
This is the exact one I was talking about, yeah, because you'll see Danny Gray at 86. You'll see his get off, and it's again, it's a individual drill. They're just kind of working it, and you can see how he comes off. But when you see the explosiveness right here, he got out of there pretty dang quick. So
yeah, he was at that screen real quick.
I was pretty excited about that. So I'm just excited to see helmets, cleats, green grass. It's get to talk about football again, Steph. I'm very excited about it.
I know the season is so close, so close. Actually, and there's actually some tryout players as well. So let's not forget about them. And I do have a list, and oh my God, this is so tiny, right? There's a lot of rookies participating in this camp. But the one name I want to mention, I'm going to just drop out of that clip because it's so tiny. But the one name I want to mention, and I wonder if he was part of in this video, wide receiver, running back hybrid, Calvin Turner Jr. out of Hawaii. I know a lot of 49er fans were very intrigued of him, and mostly because he's that hybrid. And I immediately, when I first tweeted about him, I got a bunch of people who had watched Hawaii games talking about just how good he was there. And we talk a lot about Deebo Samuel not being happy with his wide back role. I don't know how much of that was just like part of a negotiation tactic, but regardless, it might be a good idea for the 49ers to lay off of that a little bit if they want to keep Deebo Samuel healthy in the long term, right? So maybe someone like a Calvin Turner Jr. could be an intriguing option for them. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. It's funny. I had a loyal follower. He's Loha Smitty. He's from Hawaii. He had been telling me about Calvin Turner for months. And I'm ashamed in myself that I didn't go and do the homework because, sure enough, the San Francisco 49ers brought him in for a tryout at least. And he was invited, I think from the Raiders as well. So he was a bit, highly regarded in that sense for a tryout player. So all the things that you mentioned, though, he's a dynamic athlete as a returner, as a player in space, as a wide receiver, and as a guy who can play behind the line of scrimmage as well. So I'm very excited. And Calvin Turner is one of those guys that gets me really excited about the potential of lightening the load of Deebo, like you mentioned, because I think, as we know, how exciting it was to watch Deebo play the wide back role. It was out of necessity. We were down running backs. Mostert was lost at the beginning of the year. He was our explosive, change of pace running back, and we were instantly out on him because he just hurt his knee on the second carry of the game. So we had to rely on Deebo. We had to, the 49ers had to bring in Deebo to that role because at a certain point, Jeff Wilson was recovering from a meniscus injury that suffered in OTAs around this time last year. And I don't think Jeff was ever really 100%. I bet if you asked Jeff, were you 100% last year? He'd probably say no. But,
Right.
He's a football player. He's going to get out there and he's going to make himself available. But I think, the point that you mentioned, yes, it's very exciting watching Deebo play that wide back role. However, with the contract, and again, I think you would agree as well, if the 49ers keep using Deebo as a running back, there will be extra wear and tear that comes along, and he already plays so physical, right? So I like the guys that they're bringing in.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately was probably the main concern for him. I'm sure Deebo liked being a wide back. He liked that role, but you got to think long term. I mean, football careers are short enough as it is. So, got to take care of that body. And I think, to me, part of the reason that they brought in Ty Davis Price was also to lighten that load a bit, have someone who can absorb those hits, be a bruiser. I wasn't a fan of the pick at first, just from the positional
The
value
value.
standpoint, but
Yeah.
I've come around to it. Him as a player, obviously, I think, he's going to be a great player and someone who, can take that wear and tear. I think we're looking at, let me pull up the running backs really quick. Yeah, these are the running backs working. But yeah, I'm excited about this group. Someone mentioned in the comments, Jordan Mason, someone who I'm excited about as well. So, I think there's a pretty solid group of running backs who can potentially, and not just solid, but deep, a deep group who can, if someone gets hurt, they're not going to be in jeopardy of needing to put Deebo Samuel back there. So who
Or
of
go get
this
a Trenton Cannon off the off the garbage heap, right?
Yeah, that too. They had so many like randos. No offense to those players, but they just
Right.
had a bunch of randos. Um, who of the running back group are you excited for?
So I'm definitely I was in the same boat as you. I think it was a little bit of a surprise, to see them go back to the well because I think they took Trey Sermon at around pick 88 last year. They traded up to go get him, and he's kind of a similar mold to TDP in the sense of
Mhm.
kind of a bigger body, move really well for their size, but more of a uh, less of a Mostert, right? More of a bigger body style. Um, so I think I'm seeing the idea that they're going with. I think they want to run between the tackles more. I think they
Yep.
want to be more physical from the running back position. I think one of the things that Elijah Mitchell did really well was yards after contact. And I think he might have led all rookies in that regard. He's at least high up there. So it feels like they're kind of going back to the well with that. And not only does TDP run really well behind his pads, and we've seen the crazy hits that he delivers as a running back, but he's good vision. He's good cuts and the burst, that gets talked about a lot. He's got underrated burst in regards to how quickly he can make those cuts and then shoot through the hole. And Jordan Mason as well. Like, I've identified that kind of third down role, the Jermichael Hasty role
Mhm.
as a potential spot where the 49ers could, get a little bit better at or at least bring competition in for that spot. And that's kind of what Jordan Mason feels like. He feels like a direct threat to Jermichael Hasty's role on the roster. And he's a little bit bigger, but he moves very similar to Jermichael Hasty. So I think, Jermichael did well for what he was asked to do, but I think they want a little bit more out of that spot. So I think TDP is obviously going to be on the roster. The one that I'm looking for is who's it going to be? Jermichael Hasty? Is it going to be Jordan Mason or maybe one of these other tryout running backs? But I think it's going to be something to watch for sure.
And you talk about, some of the changes that they might be making in terms of, what they look for in their running backs, running in between the tackles and all that. But as we look at this particular drill in this clip, they're catching some passes. And
Mm.
that's something that Anthony Lynn, I know he's a big fan of. That's something he wants his running backs to be involved in. So, what do you think we can expect out of that? And do the running backs that we have currently on the roster do they fit in well with that pass catching ability?
I love that you brought up that point, and it's an amazing point because obviously there's been a bit of an overhaul to the staff, which probably is going to have you're going to have a little bit of different ideologies in regards to how to move the football. When you
Yeah.
look at, running backs under the Kyle Shanahan era with the 49ers, you don't get a ton of passes to running backs. I mean, you get your occasional screens, and things like that. But how often did we see Jimmy Garoppolo check down to a running back? Now you'll get your occasional, your Tevin Coleman's, your Jeff Wilson out of the backfield into the flat, but it just felt so rare. And it just feels like it's another opportunity to spread the field, especially if you get these burners on the outside who can really stretch safeties and you could stretch them deep. And then you just sneak out the running back into the back, out into the flat. And I think the point that you make is phenomenal with Anthony Lynn. You go take a look at the stats of the running backs under his tenure with the Chargers or wherever
Hmm.
he's been.
Yep.
They get receptions and in the
Yes.
range of like 50, 60,
Yeah.
which is about double what our kind of current running backs would do at this particular time or under Kyle. So I think that's an underrated point, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's what they're doing in that drill, and I would love to see these running backs utilized more because going back to my time covering training camp last year, watching Elijah Mitchell cook like Dre Greenlaw and these other linebackers and like one-on-one drills and all that type of stuff out of the backfield, you got to see some of that skill set where like, oh, there is some receiving ability, but we never really saw it translate to the field on Sundays. So
Yeah.
I think that was more of, the type of scheme that they were running, more the outside zone. They run a lot of those short to intermediate routes over the middle of the field. So I'm excited about that. And I think they got some guys that could absolutely be a threat out of the backfield. And it would be a nice change of pace.
Yeah,
Just
definitely.
to get a different wrinkle in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I also think, Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't much of a check down guy. And I think it would help for Trey Lance to, have that outlet, having a
Right.
check down option. And, hopefully he can take advantage of that. I see someone in the comments as well pointed out the fact that TDP can also help out with blocking. His pass protection, and I mentioned this earlier because John Chapman posted like a clip of TDP's pass protection, pass blocking. Such an underrated part of his game, I think, and it was something when I watched him, I thought he was pretty freaking good at. And I can see it. I can totally see the 49ers taking advantage of that and, keeping Lance's pocket clean. Love it.
Yeah, and I think it's an underrated aspect of evaluating running backs because I think,
Yeah.
when we like take a step back, especially in the kind of the fantasy driven world, the stat driven world that we kind of live in, it can be easy to just be like, well, how do they run the football? You talk to any running back, if you don't pass block, you're not getting on the field, or at least you're not
Exactly.
getting on the field for those crucial passing downs where
Right.
you could be a potential receiving threat, because there's going to be times when the quarterback is going to see an overloaded side and he's going to have to check out of the play, and he's going to have to keep the running back in for protection, and it's going to be up to that running back to be that person to get that blitzer. And if you don't get that, you're going to get your quarterback killed. You're going to get turnovers. You're going to get stuff, and you'll never see the field. So I think that's a great point as well. And TDP seems like he's built for that. He's built for
Yeah.
contact. He invites the contact, and it just feels like there's like this like philosophical. We hear it all the time. Oh, they like football players, but there's something to that. There's something
Yep.
to these guys who want to get their nose dirty, want to do the small things that, we might be like, it's not a big deal, but to them, it's a big deal. And I think blocking, especially from the running back position, is going to be huge, especially if they're going to be passing to the
Hmm.
running backs more. It's a duality. They're going to have to block as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really quickly, I just have to address a couple of these comments from Brian because I am not a child. I'm actually 30 years old. I am. I just look like a little boy, but I'm just a lesbian.
Oh, caps out here capping. That's funny.
um, so yeah, I just had to address that one. But let's talk about this really quick because I saw Matt Barrows tweet this that Vic Fangio is at Rookie Minicamp watching. So what do you think is going on here? He said he's just observing. You know, do you believe this, or is he getting prepared to? I don't know, get familiar with this defense for whatever reason.
I was so excited. So I was on live, of course, before this, and some of my listeners were, hey, Vic Fangio's at practice. I was like, what are you talking
Yeah,
about? They're like, no, seriously, Vic Fangio's at practice.
yeah,
Because I had brought up like Chris Kursorek was like in his like game ready stance, like his nose was like, I was getting excited just about Chris. And when I started talking about like, well, D'Amico's going to get a head coaching job next year. Like it feels like a foregone conclusion that D'Amico is going to get that head coaching job. He could have got it last year, but he decided to come back. So I was talking about like, oh, well, maybe Chris could be that guy. Maybe Chris could be that person to kind of step in. And they're like, or Fangio, he's
yep.
there. I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, no, he's there at practice. I was like, was like, the Dr. Phil gif, like, oh, like I was like, he's there. So I was very excited about that, man,
Oh man.
because we know he came in for an interview or they went golfing
Yep.
and did whatever, before the staff was really continued to be built out. So I do believe D'Amico Ryans will be getting a head coaching job next year. So Vic Fangio could literally, we know he's still getting paid. He's getting paid right now
Yep.
from the Denver Broncos to not coach.
Yeah.
So if he's in as a consultant, situation or he's just observing and they're giving him the opportunity to be like, listen, this is going to be the potential team that you'll inherit next year. So get to know them now and come around and hang out and do all that stuff so we can make it a real easy transition when Miko gets a job somewhere else, and we'll just hand the keys over to Vic. And the thought of him there, I'm a 49er fan through and through. So you go back to the 2011, 12, 13, 14 years. Vic Fangio was the guy. That
Yes.
3-4 defense that he ran with Alden, with Justin Smith, with Ahmad Brooks, with P. Willie, with Navarro, Deshaun. Like you just go down the list of legends, and they fit into his defense, and his defense was elite.
Mm-hmm.
So you bring Vic Fangio around, I get excited. So I'm liking it. I really am.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that era of defense was so iconic. And you mentioned, yeah, he's still getting paid. He took the year off, but it's good to see him, still being involved. I mean, if in fact he is, ready to take on not head coaching, a defensive
DC role.
coordinator role once again, if D'Amico Ryans leaves for a head coaching position after the year. I like that he's already there and he's getting familiar with some of these guys. Like, I have to wonder if he did that voluntarily or if they kind of just asked him to come out. But I am also very intrigued by this.
I'm very excited. I got really hyped about it. Probably a little too hyped, but I was very excited about it.
And I mean, I can't blame Vic Fangio if he, attended on his own, because there's some intriguing guys on the defensive line that I too would like to be front and center to be able to watch. In this clip right here, Drake Jackson getting some work in. I'm so excited for what Drake Jackson can bring from the offensive line standpoint. You have experience playing there. What would a player like Drake Jackson, what challenges would that bring to an offensive line?
The first thing that I see with Drake that is going to be a problem no matter what is his length,
Yeah.
his arm length. Again, he's already a big body, but it's the combination of his length and speed. You combine the first step quickness, the explosion, and again, when he hits this bag, you're going to see those long arms just reach out. I still view Drake as a very raw prospect. I
Yeah.
think the ceiling is like gonna be, it's way up here. I think he's still down here in regards to being who he will be with the 49ers, but he has all the raw tools, all the raw intangibles. And again, if you get the raw speed and the length, when you add the pass rushing moves and the technical aspect of it to that, that's when he's going to be unstoppable. That's when it's going to be like, like it's already hard enough to deal with those types of traits. But when you add the technique on top of the traits, then you add the games that they play of setting you up with outside speed, that counter inside with a nice little like rip or chop. And that's what's difficult. So I don't think he's there yet, but I think that's where he will be. And when he gets there, we're going to be like, oh, the 49ers hit on something right here.
Yeah, and he is very raw. And I think I've been saying this, that like out of any team, the 49ers probably had the most luxury of being able to get him and waiting on him to basically develop into that potentially every down guy. They have so much depth at the defensive line and even at the edge position right now with a few of the additions that they made this offseason that, I mean, if he's not there yet, they can afford to wait. And maybe he comes in on those obvious passing downs, maybe. But man, with Chris Kosarick, I'm just so excited to see what he can look like. A couple weeks from now, end of the season next year. I mean, the ceiling is high with Drake Jackson, I think, and B Mack over here said, look at Kosarick and Jackson's ear. That's just Chris with every defensive line guy. Yeah, it's just the best.
That's a football guy through and through
yeah.
right there. Like he is loving his life right now. He's like, we're back, baby. We can smell the football. Let's go. His nose is right up in there. But I think the point that you make is exactly right. I think one of the things that I'm also really excited about is what he's going to look like over the guard. And again, we saw Chris messing with that last year. You look at Arden Key, and a lot of the sack production he was able to get was over the guard. And the reason why I think Arden was able to be successful is when you look at his body type. We talked about the length with Drake. Well, Arden had immense length. And when you take that type of size and you kick it inside over guards are going to have shorter arms. They're not going to move as well as tackles. And so it's an immediate mismatch. And when they're already sending double teams to Nick Bosa, if you can find a way to scheme open one-on-one matchups, because that's what it's all about, is how do we get the one-on-one matchups? And we know they're going to slide protection towards Bosa. They're going to throw double teams. They're going to throw chips. They're going to throw everything at Bosa. Okay, but how do we use that to our advantage to free up guys like Ebukam, like Omenahue, like Drake Jackson? So although I think he will have like a similar role to Arden, like where Arden wasn't, this every down player. He wasn't in a solidified role, play in and play out, but they used him like a chess piece. And I think they can do that with Drake Jackson, where it doesn't have to be a 3-down edge, where he doesn't have to come out in base downs, play against the run. I mean, he can, but they don't, like, he can build up to that, and they can just use those traits from a pass rushing standpoint, because you still got Eric Armstead, you still got Kevin Gibbons, you still got a ton of defensive line depth across the board. Hassan Ridgeway on the interior. Again, that defensive line room is stacked, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, they are deeper than deep. But now let's talk about the offensive line, because I know there's a lot of questions there. There's a lot of new competition, new faces. I would say that really the only lock on the offensive line is Trent Williams. I mean, because I don't even know if I can call Mike McGlinchey a lock at this point in time, just because he's rehabbing, he's coming back from, that torn quad. His rehab seems to be going great, but we never really know if he's going to be that same player, right? I mean, yeah, you never know until they get on the field and they start playing. They dealing with game speed and yeah. So what do you think about one? I'm just going to ask you, what do you think about Mike McGlinchey, and do we see the same guy, or is his job in jeopardy there?
So I'm very, I was worried. I think when you hear the initial reports and they threw out the numbers, 50% that he could even come back and play, that plants a little bit of a seed of doubt, especially I think if planted a seed of doubt into my mind, is I'm like, how often do you hear that? Like typically in today's, medical has advanced so far. So guys with AC, we don't even bat an eye with guys who get ACLs. I think Jamison Williams went in the first round, like fresh off an ACL tear. Like how often does that happen? Or did that like that never would have happened, 10 years ago. But there's been just so much medical advancements. So I think when I heard that number, I'm just like, oh God, 50% that he can even step on the field again. I'm like, that's terrifying. But with some of the conversations I've had with Mike, with also, he dropped that video, I think, in response to some of the noise that was starting to get generated. It definitely calmed me down. So it's still TBD. Like, I will be able to have a better answer once training camp rolls around. If he's out there, if he's practicing, if he's running out with the ones, obviously we're going to feel much better about him starting week 1. But it's still a bit of a TBD, but I feel better. Like, I feel like he will play. I don't feel like we have to worry about that. Oh, is he not going to be healthy at all to play? So I feel like that's helped that situation. But it is going to be an interesting thing to watch, I think, at training camp. That's going to be the number one things that I want to go get my eyes on. Who's going to be trotting out there at starting right tackle for the 49ers day 1 of training camp, because that's going to tell us quite a bit about, will Mike be ready for that week 1 game? Will he get any preseason snaps? Maybe he doesn't. Maybe they keep him on the shelf, to just make sure that he doesn't put himself in jeopardy. So I think it's still valid, that there's some concerns and questions about, if he will be ready week 1. The hope is that he will be. Again, I feel better that he will play again. Now I think the goalpost has moved to just, will he start week 1? He seems to be on a good track, and he seems to be on a good path. So, but definitely still TBD, and we'll have much better answers in training camp.
Yeah, hopefully he is available, because I feel like there's already enough questions on that offensive line that being able to call McGlinchey a lock would be would be really great. Let's look at some of the guys who are new on this offensive line. I mean, you can even still call Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore new on this offensive line, because they didn't get a lot of run last season. And I feel like now there's absolutely an opportunity for those guys to play a bigger role and potentially start. How do you think this competition shakes out?
At left guard, essentially.
I mean, just at not counting center, because we will talk about center in a bit. Do you feel that?
I wanted to preface that.
Yeah. Do you feel that Brunskill, let's just assume for right now that Alex Mack is back, he returns. You think Brunskill is a lock at the right guard position?
I think Brunskill is a lock to be a starter regardless of where he plays. You look at the contract; he signed his tender, I think, at about $2.5 million. I think he played last year on 800,000. Like, he was one of the best value starters on the entire team. I'm a Brunskill stan. So at this point, so the Daddy B, the Aaron Donald annihilator. So I hold Brunskill in high regard. Now, does Brunskill needs to get better in pass protection and one-on-one matchups? Of course, that's not his strength. His strength isn't going up against 330-pound power rushing defensive tackles, because we've seen it. He can get walked back into the quarterback at times. But when you look at all the other facets of his game, especially in the run game, and especially when you have an outside zone scheme, it is predicated on your guards getting to second level. It's predicated on your guard. And the linebackers in today's NFL, they're all like Fred Warner now. They're all hybrid safeties. They all move. They all are very fast. So part of being successful as an offensive lineman and the guard position, you have to beat these guys to their spot, especially these linebackers, and that's what Dan does extremely well. He's very good at getting to second level. He's very good at identifying blitzes and passing off stunts in pass protection. He doesn't lose there when he has help and he's able to pass guys off. Um, he became a solid puller last year. Again, if you look at the tape, there is a reason they only pulled Brunskill. If you watched almost every time they pulled Lakin, he just wasn't a good puller. So they could. It was like they had two completely different guards. Like one who's athletic, who can get out and move, and Lakin was athletic, but he wasn't going to get out and pull and be your lead blocker. We saw it all the time. They were pulling Brunskill to the left, whether it was he was trapping or whether he was pulling up the hole, and he did a really good job at that last year. So I think they value that. And I think it could be his last year. I don't know if they are going to extend him or not. But I really do think Brunskill is going to be a starter. It's just where is he going to start?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we're all wondering about Aaron Banks and Jalen Moore and where they might fit in on this offensive line, because I mean, we're looking at the new names as well. They added 5 new guys, including the undrafted free agents, to this offensive line as part of the 90 man. So, I mean, do they have a uphill battle, or do you think, I mean, Aaron Banks here, David Lombardi, this is his spreadsheet, by the way. Great resource.
The spreadsheet.
The
I've never
infamous
seen it.
Well, no, because the spreadsheet that everyone jokes about is actually another spreadsheet. This man loves spreadsheets. This one I am a great fan of. He had another
it's
spreadsheet
nice
about
setup.
Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo and a bunch of stats. You can imagine how that went. But Aaron Banks, I mean, he has Aaron Banks starting at, or projected starter at left guard. What do you think about that? Do you feel like that's a good spot for him?
I don't. So I'll say it like this: as someone who locked my eyes onto Aaron Banks every single time he stepped foot out with the second team unit in training camp, watching him in preseason, watching him in his 3 snaps that he played against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 11.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Aaron Banks or Jalen Moore have done anything to solidify the starting job. I think there is going to be a situation where we're looking at a real open competition at all of those spots, because look at Jalen Moore, for example. He exclusively in training camp played as LT1 because he was Trent. He didn't need to play in preseason. So Trent didn't play at all in the preseason. Who trotted out there with the starting group? It was Jalen Moore at left tackle. And he played really well in preseason. He did a really good job at it. And even against the Colts, when we had a spot start him against the Colts, he played decently as well. But it feels like he fell off. Because when we saw him transition to right tackle, he had a rough game where he got benched. It was so bad. And then week 18, when Trent couldn't go, they go to Colton McKivitz at left tackle, which was a shocker to me. I was like, oh God, we're going to lose. Because I'm like, I look at Colton McKivitz, I'm like, you're a guard. Like, you're an interior offensive lineman. And when you watch Colton play, you could see, like, yeah, you're an interior guy playing tackle, but he held up. So to me, that was an indictment on Jalen Moore and their trust in Jalen Moore. And with Aaron Banks, we're gonna find out. I didn't see anything last year. Like, it was apparent. Like, people will talk about Brunskill and they'll are already calling him the 6th offensive lineman. When I was in training camp, Aaron Banks did not pose one singular threat to taking Daniel Brunskill's job. So to assume that he's going to start over Brunskill, I think is a little bit of, it's a judgment call at this point for people who say that. But from what my eyes tell me, I don't see any world that exists as of right now where if it's Aaron Banks, like let's say versus Brunskill, Brunskill's winning that job, and it doesn't even feel like much of a competition.
Whew. Okay, yeah. I mean, he has an uphill battle to climb then. And I think, I'm not surprised at all, because just based off of they weren't very involved last year, and it's not that the opportunities weren't there,
Right.
because there were opportunities and we still didn't really see much.
Brunskill didn't play too hot at the beginning of the year. Like those first 6 games, I think, and they lost 4 games in a row. Brunskill wasn't playing that well. It's funny because we joke about him playing against Aaron Donald. It wasn't until that week 10 game where he faced off and again neutralized Aaron Donald. From week 10 on, Brunskill was a different player. So I know, and I've spoken to Brunskill about his thought process. Like, he's like, what? Like, his biggest thing when we were having a conversation was like, I have to keep the same mindset when I play Aaron Donald than I play everyone else. Because when
Right.
he plays Aaron Donald, it's true. Go watch the tape. Like he neutralizes him. And part of it's his mindset. And he's like, the thing that I need to work on is keeping that same mindset week in, week out, regardless of who I'm playing. So I don't think it's any mistake that week 10 came around, the Rams come into Levi's, and Brunskill does Brunskill things and neutralizes Aaron Donald. And then from that point on, had a phenomenal season. Now, people are going to point to, that last play in the NFC Championship game, but even in that game, when I watched the tape, the best 2 offensive linemen on that field that day were Trent Williams and Daniel Brunskill. So he gets a bad rap because, again, we see the mistakes in pass protection and we see him get, pushed around a little bit, but he did such a better job. And I really think that was his second year as a starter. That first year in 2020, he was bouncing around from center to guard, and it was still his first time playing guard, really, his first time playing center. So I still view him as a developmental prospect where he was still getting his feet under him last year, and I saw
Yeah.
him get his feet under him and then perform at a high level. So I actually expect him this year to be the best we've ever seen of him. So I'm excited about that. I think he will play really well. And I think it's going to be open competition for whatever holes are available. I really think when I look at this spreadsheet, obviously, we had the conversation about McGlinchey, and I think that remains. But when I look at these names, the guys that I can pencil in as day one starters are Daniel Brunskill and Trent Williams.
All right. Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned the fact that, Brunskill has had to develop, over time. And I'm really hoping that that could be the case for guys like Aaron Banks and
Right.
Jalen Moore
Yeah.
as well.
Oh,
Cause
yeah.
I would hate to feel like those were wasted picks.
Right. These guys aren't finished product. And I think that's it's a part of this to kind of remember. Like, although, like, like I said, like Aaron Banks last year wasn't threatening Brunskill at all, that could be completely different. Like he could come back down, maybe 10 pounds in body fat, but replace that with, functional strength and muscle and be a completely different person. Like I've seen it. I took a long time as a player myself to develop. So it's not out of the ranges of outcomes. I think it's possible that Aaron Banks shows up and we're like, oh, there's that second round draft pick that we got and that we saw at Notre Dame just mauling people. It takes time and everyone develops at their own pace. So like we said with Jalen Moore, it looked like he was a little bit ahead of Aaron Banks last year, but then took a step back. It's going to be really interesting to see how those two show up to camp this year.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe if the 49ers do a little more inside zone, like we've talked about a bit,
Yeah.
maybe that will help some of these guys out. Maybe they fit more in that kind of
Yeah.
offense. And so we'll see what happens, but I think the added competition is a good thing. It'll push some of these guys, I think. And I mean, some of the competition they've added, Nick Zakelj, Schluter, West, Poe. I mean, I think those are all really good guys with some very nice potential. So I'm really excited about that group. But let's talk about Alex Mack, because what's going on with that guy? I mean, we still have not heard anything definitive. John Lynch said, "Oh, he'll make an announcement when he's ready." And to me, like, you only make announcements really when you're
Yeah, what are you
retiring. So
announcing if you're not coming back?
yeah, exactly. So I think everyone assumed, okay, retirement, but we have yet to hear about it. So do you really think that he's still undecided?
I think that we have that the draft has come and gone and
Yeah.
we haven't heard anything. I think it actually there could be some legitimacy to that. Now, like I've been I have been one to say the entire offseason that I'm terrified of Alex Mack retiring. I never once thought, yo, he's coming back. Like, because again, you mentioned it, definitive language. Once you figure out how to listen to these GMs and coaches and kind of understand what coach speak is or GM speak is, especially when it comes to personnel, there's a very specific way in which they talk where they can't get pigeonholed into anything.
Mhm.
And when they set it up where they're not getting pigeonholed, that's when you perk up. You're like, like, wait, why are you leaving it up to Alex? Like, you know what I'm saying? So like I've always been of the mindset like I'm not going to feel comfortable until I hear definitively
Yeah.
that Alex Mack is coming back, and they still have yet to do that. So this far into it though, with the draft, because we heard Joe Staley that got announced during the draft,
Yeah.
and it was a bit of a heart attack. Like I was like, Joe, like, but then it was like, oh, we got Trent Williams, and I was like, oh, I was like, oh, okay, I feel better now. Um, but and they really made that transition really easy. Um, but with Alex, they didn't draft a center.
Mhm.
I mean, you can argue that Zakel is going to play center. I think he will play center, and I think I call Zakel Brunskill 2.0. Like he reminds me so much of Brunskill in regards to his movement ability, the way he can get out in space, all the things that I talked about Brunskill. You look at Zakel, and he's kind of that same way, but I think he might have a little bit more dog in him. Like when we talk about that. But with Alex, I mean, OTAs are right around the corner, like, and
Yeah.
we haven't heard
Yeah.
anything. So I'm actually the closer we get to like actual the vets showing up and we haven't heard anything, I'm starting to feel like maybe he is undecided. Like maybe
Yeah.
he's still truly weighing those options. Now, the 49ers did, I think, a phenomenal job of getting Poe, Sakel, Donovan West, all these other guys that could come in and potentially play center. Again, Brunskill could kick inside and play center. Trey Lance had his best training camp practice of training camp last year with Brunskill at center. Um, so I still think it's TBD, but I actually think the closer it gets to camp and we haven't heard anything, I'm starting to feel a little bit more optimistic. But
Yeah.
again, it's a moving target until he says something. We don't know, but I kind of like that he hasn't said anything yet because I'm like, well, maybe he is coming back. Like,
Yeah.
because that would be huge. We know how huge that would be.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that when John Lynch spoke about it, he said, oh, I'm trying to remember. Um, I'm forgetting now, but yeah, I agree with you. The fact that he said that they'd gotten all the information they needed before going into the draft, which to me, I
Right.
was like, oh, so they know his decision. Um, and I don't know, maybe so that
Yeah,
leaves
I
me
don't know.
questioning, but
It's weird.
I'm also with you that like the longer we get, I'm like, maybe he didn't know because he would have, if he knew, he would have just said it already. So I'm
Right.
not sure. I'm not sure what he's waiting on. Um, it'll be interesting, but I agree with you as well that the closer we get, I'm feeling more optimistic because if he sees, his teammates, or former teammates, playing, on
Gets
the
that itch.
field,
You know,
he's
those
getting
football players, man,
that.
we're creatures of habit. And like when you step away and you try to like take your mind out of it, like, oh, I'm not a football player anymore. You're like, I'm a football player. Like it feels weird not to like Alex Mack is, and I've talked to some of his teammates about him. He sprints from drill to drill in year 14. Like that doesn't offensive linemen are known for their like run walk. So it looks like they're literally like we literally walk. We're walking, but we just go like this with our shoulders. So it looks like we're running. Like that's the way offensive linemen we're trying to exert the least amount of energy possible. Alex Mack's the opposite. He's like a hamster. He's like all go all the time. So guys like that love it. They do it for the right reasons. He loves the sport. So I would love to see him come back. I think it would be obviously the best situation for the 49ers to have that veteran in the room, especially with potential, you know, centers in training to learn from a guy like that. Like that would be the best scenario. That would be ideal is if he comes back for one more year, especially with Trey Lance, and you can again learn these guys like West, Poe, Zakel, they can learn from him, which is invaluable. So we hope that he comes back. I have no idea at this point.
Yeah, I know Donovan West said yesterday or was it today? I think it was yesterday with the media availability. He said that, he really wishes that he can. Well, I don't know if he said wishes, but he wants
I
to
saw that
learn
quote. He
under
wants to
Alex.
learn from
Yeah,
Matt.
which I don't blame him. Alex Mack is one of the best in the league at center right now, so I don't blame him. But let's just assume that Alex Mack doesn't return. Let's go down that path. Who do you think I mean, we talked about Brunskill, so you probably like him, right? To start.
If you need that veteran presence, because I think you can use 2020 as the example. Like, because when you look at the offensive line, you had Trent Williams, you had Lake and Tomlinson, who we don't have anymore, but just got paid handsomely. And those two were there. And then you look at the right guard and the right tackle. Well, it was Brunskill and it was McGlinchey. What was the differentiating factor? They didn't have a center. They had Hornus Grasu because Weston Richburg, unfortunately, got injured and he couldn't return. And they didn't have a backup plan. And their backup plan was an undrafted free agent, or not even undrafted. He was just a guy on the streets. And clearly that didn't work. And then they tried to kick Brunskill back into center for the first. That didn't work because that's an overwhelming position to play if you've never played it, especially in the NFL, and especially like mid-year switch. Like, oh, sorry, you didn't have training camp to practice center. We're going to put you in center now. So when you look at the 2020 offensive line, they struggled so much without the center, but they still had the guards and they still had the tackles that had a top 5 unit, both in pass protection and in run blocking last year. What was the differentiating factor? Plopping Alex Mack into the middle. So I think with this scheme, you got to have your bookend tackles and you have to have the center. The guards, you can get away. Like, look at Brunskill. Like, look at the way he's developed. Look at what, Lakin was when I think we traded a 5th round pick for him. Yeah, he was a 1st round pick from the Detroit Lions, but they gave up on him. Like, so you can kind of see how you could get away with lesser guards, but you got to have the bookends and you have to have the center. And I think they could get away with it in that regard. So that's why I'm thinking maybe they kick Brunskill down to center. He knows all the responsibilities much more than a rookie. Now, of course, you have Donovan West, who, again, he was a guard for 3 years, played that last season at center. And he played really well there. But again, the experience that Brunskill has is invaluable in a sense, at least from, I think, a rookie standpoint. But who knows? Maybe Zakel is that, or again, like they kick Brunskill down, Zakel goes to guard, or Burford goes to guard, or Banks or Jalen Moore, whoever it is. I would be most comfortable with a veteran center. And of course, veteran bookend tackles, but we got one tackle locked in, and everything else is kind of TBD at this point.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you that Brunskill would make the most sense from the standpoint of wanting someone who has the experience, because it is no easy job. We know that. And I mean, people have talked about the fact that Shanahan has never started a rookie center, and I think that's for good reason, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot to know in this offense already, and to be that sort of glue of the offensive line, I mean, that it takes someone who knows a lot about everything in the offensive line,
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
So I'm with you there. But let's go down this path really quickly. Like, if out of Zakel, West, and Poe, let's say Alex Mack is back, and you have these three guys next year. Let's say they stick around, whether on the 53 or the practice squad, right? We have these three guys. Who do you think is, I mean, all hypothetical, but who do you
Right.
think would be the best to take over at center if Alex Mack retires next year?
I think it would be West or Poe, just for the simple fact that they have experience there. With Zakel, like you see him no, that's Schluter, number 78, Zakel 63. But with Zakel, he's played offensive tackle. Now, his frame and his traits to me tell me he can play center, but you still have to go learn that new technique. Your stance is completely different. You go from being out on an island to now the nose tackle is about this far from your face because you're snapping the ball and they're lining up off you. It's just a completely different world. So I would imagine it would take time for Zakel to transition from offensive tackle to center. So I would look more at guys like West, who's right here on the screen, number 61, or even Poe. I mean, watching these drills, and I'm very excited to get out to training camp to watch Poe once the pad gets on.
Mhm.
But when you watch Poe move right here, you can see the movement ability. And again, low man wins, especially on the line of scrimmage. So as long as you have the strength behind you, if you can be low at 6'1", again, he's 300 pounds, and you see the movement ability right there. He can generate push. He's got quick feet and he's got a good base. I would be excited to see one of those two go. I would see more Zakel maybe transitioning to center, but have a better shot at starting at guard day one, where I would be looking more at West or Poe in that competition to see which one of those two stand out. And I think that would be a fun watch. And Burford, I think, definitely is going to be a guard. He looks like a more athletic Laken Tomlinson.
What do you think about Burford getting number 74?
I didn't even make that connection until just now. You just said it.
Well, I saw a
I
lot of
mean,
people like pissed off about it, and I mean, maybe for good reason, right? It's like that number probably should have been retired or something.
they're gone to like a first round pick or something like that. I mean, I get it. Burford, is taken in the fourth. I didn't make that connection. He's got big shoes to fill. Definitely got big shoes. That's the Staley legendary 74. But as long as he comes out and plays well, I think it won't be too much of a problem. Because hey, we've seen it on the flip side. When Solomon Thomas took number 94, like we're like, okay, we're gonna give it to the number 3 overall pick. Justin Smith's old number. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, that's enough about the rookies. I mean, I think I'm very excited about some of these guys. We'll keep tabs on them for the next couple of days. Rookie minicamp ends on Sunday. That's the final day. So, we'll keep tabs on it for the next couple of days. But now let's go into some way too early season predictions. I have the schedule up over here, and I'm not going to pigeonhole you into, because again, this is way too early.
Right.
Give me an optimistic prediction and a pessimistic prediction.
See, that's how I think. I will admittedly say I am not a schedule predictions person, especially like we're not even through training camp. We don't know
I'm
what
giving you
rosters are
an
going to look
out.
like. I know you are. Thank you so much. Because I would give my guests the same amount. We actually did yesterday on live. We did a chat score prediction, and the prediction that we came out at, of course, is going to be optimistic because it's 49er fans. We landed at 12-5. I think from an optimistic standpoint, 12-5 is a range of outcome. I think it could happen. Again, it's a tough schedule. And I think, but I like the way it's set up. I like that we go on the road, come back home, go back on the road, go back home, go back on the road. Like I can conceptualize how they can get in a rhythm right off the bat. And, like I said earlier, 49er players are creatures of habits. So if you can create almost the first block of 5 games to be this cadence of home and away, I think that could actually benefit them. And to start out the year in Chicago against Justin Fields, I'm praying we see Justin versus Trey week 1. If not, I'm going to be severely disappointed. But the first 2 games that they start out with, with the Chicago Bears, with the decimated Seattle Seahawks, I feel really good about that. Like, I feel like that's a great way to start. You think they're going to go 2-0 to start, because what I tried to preface to yesterday is the 49ers defense is going to be legit, right? Like, you go back to 2011 with Jim Harbaugh, Vic Fangio, who we spoke about earlier. The 49ers went 13-3 because of their defense and special teams, not because Alex Smith was lighting it up. That's not at all what it was. It was because Akers was I think he set a record for field goals made in a season that particular year. And the 49ers defense was elite. I think when you look at the depth of this defensive unit, defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs, this is the deepest I've ever seen this team in the better part of a decade. So with D'Amico Ryans, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Jimmy Ward, Charvarius Ward, Emmanuel Mosley, Jason Barrett comes back, like Azeez Al-Shaair, and the way he stepped up, Drake, like we just go down the list. Like, they have a really good defense. So I think the defense is going to win them a lot of games. We saw it last year. The defense is the reason why the San Francisco 49ers made it to the playoffs, kept them in contention. It was the defense. The offense struggled a lot last year. And I could imagine a similar scenario where the offense isn't going to, especially if you have what I'm calling a rookie quarterback with the offensive line that we don't even know what it is. Like, I would imagine the offense is probably going to be in a similar boat where they're going to be finding out who they are. It's going to take until week 7, week 8 until it really clicks for them. And in the meantime, it's going to be up to the defense and special teams to keep them in games. So with that in mind, 12-5 is a realistic outcome. But if I had to put a pessimistic outcome, or maybe, I guess that's a way to put it, I feel like 10-7 would be a floor where we would feel like I would feel good about a 10-7 floor. Like if with Trey Lance and the offense,
it's a really high
and
floor.
they went 10-7. Like I think we're it's above 500. Like we're maybe scratching at the door of a wild card spot. But again, with a quarterback that we don't know how he's going to hold up through an entire year, no offensive line, new offensive coaching staff that I don't think gets talked about. I mean, we talked about it, but there's still a new staff. They still have to gel. So I think it's going to be up to defense. We've seen the special teams bolstered. I think the 49ers they understand they need all 3 phases to win this or win games this year. And I think the special teams and defense are going to be relied on a lot to win those games. So you find me somewhere between, 10-7, 12-5. At 12-5, obviously optimistic. That's like 12-5. Build the statue of Trey Lance yesterday. Like if all these, you haters, whatever you want to call them, the people love to take shots at a guy who's barely like not even just turned 22 and we're taking shots already. Like, what is going on? But like, if he comes out and leads this team to 12-5, build the statue, future Hall of Famer. Let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah, I am with you there. I'm actually impressed by your pessimistic prediction because let me tell you mine, and no one hate me because obviously optimistic. So my
I
optimistic
won't hate
one,
you because I know where you're coming from. It's coming from a good place.
optimistic. I say 11-6, and I know a couple people in the comments said that as well. 11-6, maybe 10-7, and so 10-7 was your pessimistic one. So that's
Right.
my optimistic floor. My pessimistic one, and again, like this is in the event that Trey Lance looks very raw still. He,
Which is a
maybe he goes
viable
down.
outcome.
Yeah, and maybe he goes down the Josh Allen path where year one, there's a lot that he needs to work on. I say pessimistic 8-9, 9-8.
Yeah.
That's what which
I
is
think
not
that's a
even
true
that bad.
Right.
That's
It's
really
not.
not that bad. Like,
It's not.
yeah,
It really isn't.
the rest of the roster is pretty solid, but I think, and like you said, a lot will be, defense and special teams will be relied on a lot. But at the end of the day, quarterback is a big position. You can win and lose games at that position, and so that's where that pessimistic one is coming from, which I don't think is that bad, but
I don't think it's that bad at all. If you're dropping like a 5 and a 12, they're like, okay, we're on a 49ers podcast. So we've got to remind ourselves that we're going to have our fans coming at our necks if we throw out 5 and 12. But again, it's all it's ranges of outcomes, right? That's why I like the way you prefaced it, optimistic, pessimistic, because we're in a spot where you can't give like an ultra accurate opinion. Like, yes, rosters have been formed, but it's still at 90 man rosters. We haven't had our crazy injuries yet. We know how it is. Someone's going to go down. We don't know who it's going to be yet, whether it's on our team or whether it's on someone else's team. We lost 2 potential starters and a swing tackle in OTAs last year. We lost Tarvarius Moore. Jeff Wilson goes down, and Justin Schools lost for the year in OTAs before they even put pads on. So it's a hard thing to judge right now. But again, ranges of outcomes would tell you that, the 12-5 is going to be pretty optimistic. Like I said, if they go 12-5, build the dang statue because future Hall of Famer Josh Allen, Trey Lance is the new standard. If he goes 12-5 in his first year starting, like that, even if you had to rely on special teams and defense, that means he's taking care of the football. That means he's not turning the ball over, which for me is going to be the main thing. I don't expect Trey Lance to be perfect. In fact, I expect him to be imperfect. And I think that's part of the expectations of some of the fans that they have a hard time with, is there's this expectation because he's the number 3 overall pick that he has to be perfect in some sense. No, he's going to be imperfect. And if you can set your standards to that now, then I think you'll be able to manage what actually occurs during the year, because this dude hasn't played meaningful snaps since 2019. Yes, we can look at week 17. Yes, we can go back to the Cardinals game. We didn't even know what scheme he's running. He didn't even know what he was doing. Like, it just wasn't a good setup. It was a setup for failure, and he still won one of those games. So to be honest, I really think if he just goes above 500, and I said this on someone's tweet, I think it was Vicious tweet, about like, how would you quantify a successful season from Trey Lance? Mm-hmm. As long as we see the growth from the first part of the year to the last part of the year, and we see him get better, that's a win. That means that ascension is going to continue. And it's kind of irresponsible to just think, even though he's immensely talented, it's just kind of like to think he's going to come out and light the world on fire, which he could, but to think like, oh, it's going to happen that way, like it's kind of a setup for failure for Trey, because then when you're upset that your take wasn't right, you're going to be mad at Trey. Like, and that whole like whirlwind of just energy gets created. So if we can just have the thought process that Trey will struggle, it's not if he struggles, he will struggle, and that's okay, because he will learn from those struggles. And if we give him the grace to learn from those struggles, then we will all be better off in the long run.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely with you there. The quarterback position, it's a marathon, it's not a race, and yeah, I'm with you. I think Trey Lance is going to take his lumps this season, and that is okay. That's what we signed up for, and that is what we are happy to do with him, as long as we see that growth over time, which I think we will. But again, this is a great spot to end our episode. Brad, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about rookie minicamp and all of these exciting new names that we have to talk about. Just a quick reminder, guys, I have a giveaway going for a Trey Lance jersey. So make sure you were subscribed to the channel. That is step number 1. Step number 2, go to my Twitter at Stragasaurus. Go to that pinned tweet at the top of my Twitter account and reply with a screenshot of your subscription so that I know that you are subscribed, and you will be entered to win this Trey Lance jersey.
Got to get on that.
Yeah, I got to. All right, Brad, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Peace.